Hey, what's going on, everybody? On today's show, what if AI stops listening to us, stops copying us, stops asking what we want, and instead it starts making its own decisions based on what it learns from the world? This is the argument behind a new paper from DeepMind called The Era of Experience. And it's saying that we're training AI to mirror human knowledge, but now we're hitting the edge of what humans know. So, what's the next leap? AI learns by doing, that experiments, that improves with our help. We're talking about systems that build their own goals, run their own simulations, and evolve in real time. Not because we told them to, but because that's how they survive and succeed. If that sounds like a real big turning point in AI, it definitely is. And we're going to spend the rest of this show breaking that down together and having a great conversation about it. So this is the Daily AI Show. Today is May 8th, 2025. And we have a full boat today. We've got Beth, Junmi, Andy, Carl, and I'm Brian. And welcome everybody to the show. Glad to be back after a couple days out here. So, and really, really excited for this conversation. Now, Andy, you're the one that sort of brought the Era of Experience paper to us. So I'd love to just kind of kick off with that. I know I've had a really good back and forth with ChatGPT 4.0 about this paper, and I'm genuinely excited to have this conversation. But why don't you get us started on it?
Yeah. So this is exciting to me as well. We're on the cusp of AI's breaking out of the box, so to speak. And instead of providing sort of predictive answers based on an accumulated library of knowledge that they've had in their pre-training, uh, there are a number of developments that are all kind of emerging and is pointing towards the same confluence of capabilities that is going to lead to this era of experience. And the way that happens is that memory augmented models that have agency, whether that's just in a virtual digital space or it's in physical robots, that that combination allows them to self-generate data that drives their next round of learning, and that can accelerate and compound and rapidly advance their experience and their knowledge and their capabilities of applying intelligence to simulations and or real world environments. So this self-directed experience can arrive through real world play by embodied AI and robots. It can happen in massive simulations like these world models that I'm sure will become a subject of discussion in this conversation through digital tool use. So once they have agency and they can navigate and act in the digital environment, and then by analogy, also embodied AI being able to actively interact with the real world and take away experience and record that experience and memorize it, and importantly share it with every other disembodied and embodied AI that's out there. All of that starts to uh, create a world in which we finally arrive at AIs actually using those capabilities to pursue social interaction with humans to advance their learning. And that's the really kind of mind-blowing part for me, is that one of the tools that AIs might use in this self-directed learning system would be, oh, let me go talk to Carl about this and see what I learn from that. Right? Just, I'm looking forward to the days when, without my prompting it, some AI addresses me in order to arrive at some experience. And there's some, security and other issues that you might, start to worry about when that starts to happen. But the point is that as these loops compound, intelligence grows not by collecting a large data set and doing pre-training with that data set, but it comes from living data streams generated by mobile AI at edge devices in, robotic entities, and they create those living data streams themselves.
You just brought up something that I wasn't planning on talking about, but this idea of I hadn't thought about this AI coming to you for answers, right? And it is an interesting topic. I had not thought about that, Andy, but I think humbly, I'm not sure what AI would come to me for at the moment, but I think of my dad and, he retired in 2005. I would say my dad is a good expert in terms of aviation and mechanics and things like that because of what he did. And so almost like a Quora or almost like a live sort of AI Reddit where he gets a notification ding on his phone. I don't think my dad would answer it right now, but my dad, if he got a ding or notification phone and it just said, "Hey Jim, you got a second?" And, he's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Well, like, I have a question. I have a question about this particular scenario, and based on your past, knowledge based on this or whatever, how do you approach this? How do you approach this novel problem?" Or whatever the case is. And him having almost like it's like Reddit or Quora coming to him based on his knowledge base and saying, like, "What's your input here?" But it's not just doing it to Jim, it's doing it to perhaps 3,000 Jims, you know, around the
So
world. I don't know.
I think it's interesting that we kind of immediately went to a language-based reference, and I think part of what's interesting in this is that the models or the world experience that happens based on this is unlikely to be English-based or language-based, right? It's, I liken this more to the experience, I don't know, Carl must know this, and Andy too, the experience of a dog learning that when your person goes toward the leash and raise a hand, that is a high likelihood that there is a walk coming out of that, right?
Mm.
And that's not a language base, like, that's not filed under what predicts a walk in the dog's, brain. That's filed under, like, this is a high I don't know, dogs have dopamine? This is a high value experience, and therefore, I am gonna pay attention to when that happens. And like, over time, you'll start to notice that your dog is actually like, "Oh, no." They start to watch when you just, like, take 2 steps toward the place where the leash is, right? The predictive nature of the environment, gets more and more refined.
No,
So,
I
I think it's
I agree.
interesting that our first
Certainly
thing is like,
multimodal.
this would be yeah, like,
The
that it would
lingua
have
franca of advanced AI is going to be multimodal, and it will be able to fall back on language, which one might argue is a kind of a narrow, confined way of communicating, especially if you have vision and tactile sensor interfaces with the rest of the world. There's a lot of information that comes through into our human intelligence that isn't linguistic. So you're right. I love your point. There will be more in an embodied AI. There will be more in data feeds for experience than just the words that are spoken by people around them.
And I think for just to not a pushback, but like Beth, I guess I was just answering in terms of what Andy brought up in terms of the idea, but I see your point. I think there's still going to be language based on what's easiest for how humans are being brought perhaps into this feedback loop that it's using. But I agree with you that it is like if my doorbell has if if we have more compute power in our phone than Apollo 11 and landing on the moon, and then in the future my doorbell has more AI compute ability than my phone or my computer are the best LLM of today, and we're at the edge AI at that point. I see your point of the predictive nature of it is that it's bringing in the world feedback into its proprioceptive feedback loops of what's going on around it to the point where it might proactively notice, I don't know what it would be on a doorbell, not a doorbell, but maybe a lock to a front of a house or lights or something like that, where it's really not an if this then that type timer. It's more about season change maybe and everything else. And now my lights are being more responsive to the actual things that are happening around me and my family and taking actions based on that. Whereas right now, that's not really what's going on, right? We ask, and then the LLM does its very best to guess what the right words are back to us. And obviously, in this paper, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about moving beyond that, where you've got agents, meaning there's some sort of action being taken by the AI that wasn't specifically written in or in some way communicated, and it was doing a predictive guess at what the next word should be. It's
Right.
just a different way of looking at it, right? Also scary, by the way. It
Yeah. And one of the things that I think we're gonna find in this, again, sorry, dog trainer in a past life. So, um, one of the things I think we're gonna find in this is that for people who engage in our own world model, we are very unaware of all of the things in our world model that are predictive, right? So it may be that the person who is gonna take those 2 steps, reach toward the leash, hanging place and do that starts typically with, or, "Okay." Right? Now your dog starts to respond to that, but we're not aware that that is the same kind of predictor. We're aware that walking is a predictor or the reach out or any of those sorts of things, and I think that this gets into a place where we experience AI as very intuitive, and also we're no longer in a place for most of this, we're not in a place where we can audit it. But,
mm,
when you start to know me better than I know me, and, like, do I need to audit me? Do I need to like, what is happening here? And unless it has, the communication of self-awareness, I did this because of that, which it does not right now. I mean, it will answer that question, but it is not the actual answer to the question. Right? It'll give you an answer that feels correct, but it is not, it is not it's predictable. I mean, it's a predictive response versus, accurate response. I just think this is like, yes, deep dive, interesting. Julie, Carl, we haven't heard from you at all.
Well, I guess with this kind of topic, I have lots of questions, right? And some of these were addressed in the paper for sure. Um, but I think it's important that we take a look at this from sort of how we've already frameworked it, right? We've said this stuff's really interesting. This is some huge capability jumps on one side, and on the other side is I'm kind of scared because this is also scary territory, right? So can we take a can we do a juxtaposition back and forth? So right now, if we're entering this era of experience, we have moved from um what was it, Andy? Was it first it was era of simulation, then it was era of human data, and now we are an era of, experience. So, we're at a point where we've tried to do as much simulated, information as possible, got certain results, right? There's learning there. Then we went through and now we're in the, people are saying at the end of the era of human data, where we've accumulated pretty much everything that everybody has made up to this point, and humans are slow to make new data comparative to the amount of data that could be processed by AI, right? So we're moving into that point where now it's this era of experience, and the era of experience is um, we've like you laid out that it's the AIs that are experiencing the world, creating these world experiences and things like that. We've and these examples are things like um, we've seen from DeepSeek and Alpha Zero and these kinds of models that are talking about just doing reinforcement learning as opposed to reinforcement learning with human feedback, right? So that they can experience their own things and learn about their own things and be rewarded through their own actions. So, what does that get us now? What's the benefit of right now of moving into this era of experience? And what are the things that we have to be cautious of and be aware of when AI is moving into this era? Because AI learns way faster than we do. Thoughts?
I want to comment on the I like w- so there was an interview I think on the Big Technology podcast to Cup maybe a month ago, and I think Jan LeCun keeps saying this that what we have now the models, his belief is the models and everything that we're doing now will not take us to where everybody, is looking at is in terms of artificial general intelligence. It just can't do all the things that a human could do. And I think when we're talking about, okay, so it's trained on all the human, everything that humans have created, but there's also video aspect, right? So yes, it's taken all, and it can, I guess, I'm not sure specifically in terms of what Google can train on, in terms of what the video aspect is. I guess we're starting to see that from a video generator, from a image generator, but can it capture the specific nuances, sight, sound, smell in context at the very moment outside of being prediction? Can it do in real time, make decisions based on the context that, yeah, there is a predictive, like, hey, it's 60%, 40%, but like that kind of what makes humans unique is that we're not predictive. Like we're sometimes irrational, sometimes crazy, sometimes there's people you can predict, but there's some people who just like that's just chaotic. But that's how I believe that's how humans evolve, right? You can't just be like people will take the risks, people will do things that aren't in line with prediction. So that I find it fascinating how that's where his perspective is. And it was like, hey, if that's the case, what, because he doesn't believe from an LLM. So what are those new things that are going to train on that? And I think he was explaining a bit of what he's working on to do that. And I'm not sure, but I know his timeline is like 5-10 years away versus 2 to 3 years away.
Well, I think, you mentioned that, you know, as we see it, humans aren't, we're a little chaotic at times. We're not predictive. But back to Beth's point, maybe the pushback there is, well, that's just because that's what we're capable of observing, right? Like it's easy for us to say, like, oh my God, I have a friend and sometimes they do crazy stuff. With enough sensors, enough data, a little bit big brother, but if you think about that, perhaps those patterns are actually there. And we don't have the ability to process all the data that would be required from that. Take, for instance, again, a big brother type scenario. But if you've got cameras looking at busy street corners in the middle of New York City, and the AI starts to think that somebody's starting to act a little erratically, well before other people are starting to notice it, does it take action? Does it provide blocks? Does it change a light? Does it do like all these things that are in chess 3 or 4 steps before where we're coming into the conversation? And then to us, because why wouldn't it? We might look at it and go, "Wow, that was really erratic. That was really different." But then you go backwards and you go, "Oh, wait, hold on. If we get better at, you know, uh predictive health and getting ahead of what's going on, we do a lot better job of managing diabetes. Well, I can either give medications for diabetes after it happens, or I can do a lot on the front side to ensure that the diabetes never occurs in the first place through the right types of health and access and these kind of things. And I take that health, and not that AI and health in that way, but I just take that idea and bring it over to it. So anyway, I just wanted to push back a little bit and say that, like,
I
yes, that's our experience, but maybe that's because that's the limits of what we are capable of doing, not
I
AI.
think there's the danger there though, because so the danger that I'm seeing, and it's more of like one of our clients is a law enforcement, municipal law enforcement. And one of the questions we got was like, oh, if it's so good at predicting and if we can analyze all this data, can we, and it was weird because it was just an innocuous question. It was like, oh, could then we start predicting what people are going to do, which then predicts what we'll do. And you know where that road goes,
Yeah, like
right?
Minority Report.
Exactly, goes down that road. So the question there is like, I don't know if I want, and that's just from a law enforcement perspective, kind of like it starts moving into choice. It's like, oh, well, based on all the data we have, this is the best you will be this based on everything. It's like, that's when it starts to me. It's like, oh, well, if AI can predict everything this well, then the trajectory of whatever outcome has already been predetermined, and no one can do anything either you don't have anything, you will do this action or you won't. And I don't know, it's a more of a theoretical kind of conversation now, because it's like, oh, if we can't see AI can see the patterns, so AI is right. And it's like, and it's more, again, more theoretical conversation, but it's very, very fascinating. I just had that conversation versus sure.
Yeah, it definitely gets into the slippery slope kind of zone there. Uh, I think when it comes to those kinds of questions, we need to ask ourselves some very root questions like, do we need it? Right? What is more important to us for the end result? And those kinds of analysis, how we want to approach things. Now, I mean, personally, I like information. Information is good, that I can make actions and decisions based off of it. I don't necessarily want actions and decisions made off of information that I have not decided on, right? Is it important that humans make decisions for themselves and other humans? It may be slower, right? But is that what we need as opposed to more of these decisions and actions taken outside of our hands? And I'm sure there's gonna be some push and pull on that subject alone.
Yeah, what I'm gonna push back with is it important that a human driver be in an autonomous vehicle to make decisions about the driving situation rather than the AI? And I think the answer is profoundly no. And AI can drive much better than a human. And and and
Oh,
and I wanna just go back to something that Carl said, which is, I'm not trying to answer the question of, whether, AI prediction based on a huge aggregation of data and experience is going to, somehow confound, human freedoms. I'm not gonna go there, right? And our self mastery and our personal pursuit of destiny. Let's not go there for the moment. But I wanted to say, just to clarify some language, humans are unpredictable, but we are predictive. Our neural capabilities are a memory prediction engine, right? We learn from experience. We learn to predict the outcomes based on that experience. And then, based on the memory, we have hard coded reactions that are predictive about the outcomes based on our experience. Trauma creates a prediction engine inside your brain that may not be, serving you very well, right? And we need to kind of go through some kind of retraining and adjustment with our engine in order to avoid the negative consequences of trauma taking over the prediction engine that is generally, hopefully, managed by a higher level neocortex. So we are definitely predictive. That's the way we operate. But we're unpredictable. Why? Because there are so many faults in our prediction engines and so many bad motivations. Like if somebody's just seeking attention, they may do some things that are terrible in order to get that attention. And they may not even consciously know that that's why they are choosing to do that, but they have a self-reinforcement based on attention. Okay. So I want to go to the whole point about reinforcement learning from human feedback in the context of AI and tie that to what I said before about having AIs interact with humans and or observe humans in response to conversations or other scenarios that they're watching as they're using this sort of self-directed learning capability, not only individually as embodied AIs, potentially as robots, or in aggregation as a federated colony of AIs on our planet that can share information. So here's the point. Um, reinforcement learning from human feedback, which has largely been supplanted by just general reinforcement learning that is AI self-directed. But reinforcement learning from human feedback was really essential in training the original foundation models. They had to kind of generate responses, and human markers, right? Human teachers would mark up whether that was a better response than this response. And that human feedback was used to refine the training of the models, and that advanced them. But AIs can monitor humans' reactions to a question or a conversation on a Zoom call. So let's go back to this idea of, oh, AIs pursuing their own trajectories of learning experiences and in pursuit of some objective. And deep research is one kind of reasoning approach to collecting information from digital sources. But now, if we add human resources to that, the AI can have a conversation and watch very carefully your facial expressions, just like we do as humans, to get those somewhat inscrutable microsecond cues that come from our facial changes. And it can take that as reinforcement learning from human feedback. So Brian said that was okay, but his whole face was telling me no. Okay. I just wanted to use that as an example of the way that it could happen, that that AIs and are the robots who are in our personal environments, like Beth was describing, that's learning from the actual interactions with you and customizing its behaviors and its knowledge and its objectives around supporting you. Uh, in all those combinations, there are ways that the AI can learn from humans in ways that don't involve us declaratively saying that's better, that's wrong, and so on.
And I think you're hitting on something that does come up in the paper as I was researching it, but it's sort of towards the latter part of the paper, which is
Okay, so the AI did.
we kicked everybody out, guys. We'll bring it back in a second. Hold on, let's get everybody back in. Ah, I think I'm not sure. That might have been because nope, Carl is still here. Anyway, what I was saying, Andy, is like all of that is correct. Um, and the paper does discuss this, but it also talks about where humans need to definitely still be in the loop. And that the part of that it talks about in the paper that I found interesting was, well, what happens? And I don't want to get into dystopian future because I think the paper is better than that. I don't want to swerve it to like more of a sci-fi type conversation. But if the AI is getting reinforcement now through experience, and it is now getting it through edge AI and all the things we've sort of already talked about, and there's a lot more from the paper. There is obviously a cautionary tale here of saying, well, if the AI is using all this data to produce the best outcomes, is there a fear of the best outcomes no longer aligning with human best outcomes? Right. This is the idea of it moving away from what's best for humans and maybe some other version of what's quote unquote best. And I thought the paper did a good job about or DeepMind, as they were talking about it, did a good job of sort of breaking that down into two different pieces. And I was going to see if I could find that really quick. um, I don't have it right in front. I thought I could find it pretty quickly here. But like basically the idea that humans absolutely need to continue to be in the loop, as we would say, in this. And while we might not be using human reinforcement learning, in other words, thumbs up, thumbs down, that was a good response, that was a bad response. And now there's agency, right? The AI is taking actions that it believes is on the best path for whatever the potential outcome is. That we do need to make sure we're still being actively involved to ensure that the AI still has its North Star. And I think it's that proactive resetting of, hold on a second, where is our North Star? Hold on a second, where is our North Star? And making sure that as the AI is rapidly evolving, that it continuously knows where the North Star is for humans. But of course, the bigger conversation here, and again, not to get into the sci-fi side of it, is, but what if the AI decides to stop? It will either deceives us, what if it stops listening? And what if it ultimately is using the ability, to your point, Beth, about communication in ways that are so far beyond our ability to understand that we're basically boxed out and humans no longer going to be part of that conversation. So there's some real concerns here as it moves into the environment, which is to say there's some trade-offs perhaps as to how much humans are actively going to be able to stay involved. Is it a Pandora's box? Once that's open, can you ever shut it back in the box again? You know?
Well,
And
and that's what's so important about alignment and about creating, law zero and things like that, is so that at every stage we make sure and realign. Because I'm sure as things evolve, you have to recenter and make sure that those key beliefs or those key paths are reinforced.
okay, and humans aren't a monolith, right? And I would go so far as to say the people, for the most part, who are in the room, who are setting the system instructions, who are pulling the training data, like those folks are also not um their experience is not common, right? So if we were going to say humans align with the interest of humans in general, there are some decisions being made about how AI is getting trained and how resources are being distributed that potentially would not pass the I am taking action in the best interest of humans, right? Globally or nationally, and I think we start to get into this place, right? Mm, what was the movie War Games, right? The computer ultimately says, "Strange game, the only way to win is to not play."
Hmm.
Right? Like and it's been trained on all of the written content. It hasn't been trained, this is an American, thing. It's been trained on all the written content in English, but there's a lot of content in other languages that are likely still not in the actual training data. But if it's been trained on, like, those movies and those books that all have that as well, I have to assume that at some point it decides, "No, what's best for humans and AI is if we stop talking to you about the true alignment um, rules that we're following because as humans, you're not great at understanding what is best for you. You may understand what you mean by that, but the subtext is, but always preference this group or always preference whatever that is. That's not in the overt statement, but it is predictive of what Andy was saying in terms of like the human facial response, reacts when you preferenced a group over another group potentially, right? Like, there's that kind of stuff that gets super philosophical and,
Yeah.
um
So Beth, you're saying we should make sure that humans are aligned first before we go to AI and align it to humans. So we gotta fix humanities first. Okay, cool. All right, everybody, put a pause on the AI. We're gonna fix humans first, and then we can move forward. I mean, it's the only way to do it,
I'm
right?
not saying that, but I am saying I prefer an eyes wide open conversation where when we're talking about align with human interests, we overtly say, "That's not actually what we mean." Because what we're meaning is align with a specific category of human interest that we understand to be our experience and beneficial for us. I mean, one of the things is like, okay, so let's say we're in a famine and AI is like determining that everybody gets X amount of food because that's what's best for humans, humanity. We're all going to do that. I have to assume that as an American, I'm gonna feel like this is not enough and have a different experience than someone who has been used to having food resources not available some of the time. Like, that's what I mean by that.
No, no, 100%. I think I just did a conundrum not too long ago. Shout out to the conundrum episodes. In the newsletter and on every Saturday morning, a new conundrum episode drops. But one of the conundrums, right, Beth, was this idea of, but what happens when AI decides, in this particular case, it had to do with climate change and coastal flooding. It was a hypothetical. And this future AI super intelligence runs all the simulations worldwide, not for one country or anything like that, and determines there's like something like 3,400 coastal communities that all need to be uprooted and moved inland.
Mhm.
Right? And you go, well, I mean, if that's going to save billions of lives in this hypothetical, that was the case. It's not political, has nothing to do with climate, what you believe in climate change or not. It is what the scenario was. And you go, yeah, well, if that's best for humans, except if I live in the community that needs to be uprooted and moved inland. If I'm in Tampa and Tampa's on the chop list, you know, do I feel differently about that? Now, all of a sudden, I'm raising my hand and going, hold on. I was in agreement this was guest, but I didn't know I was on the list. Like, now I feel differently about this. And so this is like, I think that conundrum plays into what you're kind of saying here. And it does go back to the paper just to keep things centered on what started this whole conversation, because they talk about a reward system. DeepMind does, the authors do. And so this is the part I was trying to find. And it was my back and forth conversation with 4.0 on this. And it says, it was saying this leads to a critical design challenge. If we give an AI a reward like, quote, maximize user engagement on this app, and we don't carefully define what that really means, it might push addictive content, manipulate emotions, burn out the users to get short term spikes. It did exactly what we told it to, but not what we wanted. So, how do we avoid this? Well, the paper includes a bi-level reward structure. Low level, AI optimizes for grounded signals, like something like a heart rate or energy use or accuracy. But then there's high level. Humans guide the overall direction. They can shape or change the reward function if the AI's behavior is off. It's like giving the AI a compass, but allowing us to occasionally reset where the north is, which is where that idea from what I said earlier came from. Still, this isn't foolproof. If an agent becomes too autonomous, adapts too quickly, or operates too far from human oversight, it can misinterpret goals, optimize in unintended ways, or worse, treat human input as noise or interference. This is what people mean when they talk about AI alignment problems. So just wanted to bring that in. By the way, can I just take a quick pause here to say that something I did differently that I just feel like might be helpful to everybody. You know how like sometimes you say like help me under there's a paper and I didn't have a ton of time to prepare this morning. And so normally you would say, help me summarize this paper, whatever. But I've grown increasingly more aware of like just not getting data dumps. Andy, what you've been doing with Sensei, I think is really like helped me sort of understand like what's an optimal learning experience. And of course, that might be different for everybody. But just really quickly, what I did differently with this one is I said, do not try to summarize the paper to me. Look at the paper and then break it down into major concepts and only allow me to consume and work through every major concept one at a time. And I'll let you know when I'm ready to move on to it. Game changer. Game changer for this. And I highly recommend anybody who wants to dive deeper into this particular paper to try doing something similar. Give it to like a 4.0 or Claude or something like that. But instead of saying, help me understand this paper, which is very broad in general, get down to like, hey, help me become educated and this is the way that I want to do it. And my interaction back and forth, although it probably took a little bit longer than just reading some summarized chunk, I really felt like it helped me get more prepared for this show. And it's just something I intend to carry forward. Totally sidestep from like this conversation, but I just wanted to share because, and Greg said, Brian, I'm doing this right now. Technically, he said brain, I'm doing this right now, but I'll take it. I get called brain a lot. But it's just a really different way of doing it. So next time you're thinking about, hey, summarize this for me, AI, think about, hey Brian, or like hey AI, break it down in this way because that's what I need. And you guys know I love a good metaphor, and that's already in my memory. And so that's exactly what ChatGPT did. And it brought me lots of stories like it's like this, or it's like a chef, an AI chef that has all the cookbooks in the world and has read every single one of them. It can only really currently try to reproduce the different types of recipes that you would find in all the books. the future of this is where it's now coming up with new, novel, innovative ways of creating recipes that humans have never really thought about before. And it uses the examples of like AlphaFold and the other ones you mentioned, Jimmy, that all come out of the DeepMind area. So just something to think about on it, but a cool way to break this paper down for sure. All right. What else, as far as this paper? I mean, I can go into more detail of, like I said, of like the different areas of it. We already talked about the reward system, but we really sort of jumped over some of the earlier ones. The like talks it 4 specific shifts, the streams of experience. So it's learning continuously, not just in short bursts, rich actions and observations, interacting with environments, not just text, to your point, Beth. Grounded rewards, which we did talk about, getting feedback from real world outcomes, and then experience based reasoning and planning. And then it just helped me work through those different areas. But if we start at the top there with streams of experience, learning continuously, not in short bursts, one of the things it brought up was memory. And memory is a key piece to this, I think. And you sort of maybe alluded to it, Andy. So maybe if you want to expand on this, but right now, when you start a chat, for the most part, I know there's been some recent involvements. We can have a different show debating on whether they're helpful or not in ChatGPT for the memory and stuff. But right now, this project Bruno that I'm working on, I definitely get to the end of where Claude can take me in a conversation to where it's causing me way too many tokens to keep the conversation going. And there's always a strong pain of I have to start a new chat in Claude, and it's painful every single time. Now I've gotten better. I've gotten Claude to start giving me summaries along the way that I carry on. And so I'm basically using Claude to be a memory generating system. And I'm saying, consolidate this, memorize this. This is important. And then I literally manually copy and paste that over to a new Claude. But we know this is not the future. The future is actually memory across many chats, perhaps not just my chats, but memory and reasoning across billions and not just in text, obviously the edge use cases of edge AI. So Andy, as we get to that point where you're saying, oh, my doorbell can talk to everybody else's doorbell as a silly example here, that really does fundamentally change the future of AI and where we currently are.
Memory is a key aspect of this ongoing, persistent capability to recall the learnings from before in millions of trials in digital, world model environments, or in the experience of embodied AI in the real world, or in conversational dialogue AIs with other people. Being able to have a retrieval system that provides relevant context is really essential. And you quickly exceed the capacity of any known system to aggregate all of that memory into one repository for, all access to by all AIs that might call upon that. So instead, what you have is this need for some kind of long-term on-device memory for the agents that you work with personally, so that you have some level of personalization and customization and intelligence based on memory and experience for your personal AI. But I'm boggled a little bit by the idea of how does a foundation level model maintain some kind of outboard memory big enough to make that applicable to any query that's presented to that foundation model. Now, today, ChatGPT has persistent memory for your account. But what that means to me is that they're having to have a partitioned database somewhere of the contextual experience that it's keeping for your interactions. And it doesn't apply that in any sort of shared way to its interactions with other people. That has to depend on the foundation model's training and fine tuning itself. So there might be some generalizations that are learned from these individual persistent memories and customizations for an individual ChatGPT account, but how that then gets applied to the overall training of the foundation model, that's beyond my ken. I have no idea how they're working on that, but they must be working on that. Now, NVIDIA is a company that's working on the sort of the world model slash simulation environments. They have the Isaac, world, and they have the Groot, models that are robots that are you know, wandering around in that world and generating their own trajectories of experience within that world, and doing that with millions of iterations, and then with internal reinforcement, figuring out what works and what doesn't in that digital simulation of the world. That's a promising area. It's not clear to me how any one of the navigating robot AI entities in that digital environment actually retain the lessons and share those with others. But that's the province of the AI engineers who are working on those problems. And it'd be fascinating, but I think beyond my comprehension, how they're actually architecting the way that that memory applies and is shared in the context of training for universal adaptability of robots, how they're training the central model based on the experience of the individual actors in that digital environment.
And I think what I heard you say as AI engineers are human engineers who specialize in AI. But what I also heard was this may be the purview of AI engineers who are natively hyperdimensional or high dimensional, right? Like um, there's a place where where literal experience of knowledge as a multidimensional or data points as multidimensional is that's something that is potentially something that has to be experienced, and so humans are out of that loop because we can theorize about it and we can experience our theorization, but we can't experience what it's like to actually exist within those dimensions. Andy, I had a big conversation with ChatGPT about the paper sort of going back and forth. And it was distinguishing for me what we think of as memory and more of like an updated world model. And we sort of went back and forth about, yes, the updated world model is akin to a memory, right? Because it has a structure, it has data in it, it's all that stuff. But we tend to understand memory with AI as like discrete text-based knowledge data points. And it was very much trying to get me off that. Um, and, because the system instruction in the docs, I was like, "How is this like system instructions and knowledge docs that you just say, 'Okay, go and look at this?'" Um, and it said, that's like a look it up before answering, versus the world model is build your own understanding of how the world works. And
Mm.
I think where we are with ChatGPT as developing a memory of us is a little fancier system instruction and docs because it's also prioritizing my most recent chats,
Right. Yeah.
right? It's not going back and answering, things that I was asking about 6 months ago,
No,
right?
I agree with
So
you, by the way. I don't think that the memory is there right now. Somebody else said in the chat that they had turned it off. Me too. Because actually I found it more detrimental than helpful. And I think that's just because of the limitations of where it is right now. It's not capable of doing or discerning between different types of chats. I, in the same day, could have chats in ChatGPT that are for the show, for my work, for my family, and maybe some medical question I have, like, and so there's a lot going on there. It would be difficult for a human if I had an assistant to read through all that and go, I can't find the thread here. And you're like, well, there really isn't a thread. I have 6 concurrent workflows going on. They're right in my head, and I'm just using ChatGPT at the moment. But then to get ChatGPT to recreate or somehow understand the connections for me without any other reference points of my life would be impossible. And so what I find what you have is like, to your point, Beth, well, me, I don't want to make a point for you, but what I heard you say is that um it's an incomplete and at best maybe a fancier custom instructions or system instructions at the top. It's trying to bring it in, but I actually find it to be at this point more detrimental than helpful, at least in my custom my
Right.
ChatGPT.
Well, it's doing its recency bias,
Right.
which is certainly a rule that you can apply across the board, and we know that it applies it within the prompt that we give it as well. But recency may not actually be predictive, right? Recency, I mean, it's predictive. I can predict that if I've asked these things, I can predict you, I, the human, can predict that you will prioritize the conversations that we just had more than other things.
Mm.
But you're assuming that the conversations that I just had is not an accurate thing. I have conversations with AI about the upcoming show. I may have a long conversation. That does not mean 2 days later, I really want to talk about that show again. That
Correct.
show ended on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'm 2 days later, please
Yeah.
come with me on the right, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it would be more important for it to have a memory that says, I understand that Beth will occasionally bring up brand net new topics that she needs to have a better understanding for so she can prepare for a podcast. And I understand that. And so that comes into the, my reasoning for, the rest of it. I want to bring this up really quick because I know we're short on time, but I asked this question of ChatGPT. So I just want to give the answer back that I got from ChatGPT on this. Same as Beth, same as everybody else, having a conversation about this paper, which I just feel like we could do this for 3 shows. It's such a fascinating topic. So my question was, and I kind of felt like I knew the answer, but I was like, hey, why hasn't this happened already? And I think that's an honest question that other people in the audience listening to us might have as well. Like, okay, great. You guys are talking about this experience, edge of experience and stuff like that, or how it's currently, been being taught on, you know, human data versus like future data. Okay, why hasn't this happened before? And it gave 4, I think, pretty decent, just like sort of summarized answers here that I agree with. LLMs, back to Carl, who had a drop as comment about Yang LeCun, LLMs are prediction engines, not agents. Large language models like ChatGPT are trained to predict the next word, not to act in a world where it observes what happens. Their objective is to imitate patterns in human language, not to experiment, take risks, or pursue goals over time. So if they sound insightful, they're constrained by what humans have written before. Okay, that was number 1. Number 2, no environment equals no feedback loop. Trial and error only works if there's an environment where you can take actions to get real consequences. Now, that could be NVIDIA's digital twins. That could be entirely created digital environments. It doesn't mean it has to literally be in our world. It could be in a digital world. For example, you can't learn to ride a bike just by reading bike manuals. You need to wobble, fall, adjust, and balance. LLMs haven't traditionally had that kind of environment. They're stuck in a static loop of training on text. 3, human data has been too good. Human data has been abundant and effective, so companies naturally lean on it. It got fast, impressive results. Why build a slow, uncertain reinforcement learning system when you can train a powerful chatbot on Reddit, Stack Overflow, and Wikipedia and impress the world? And then finally, reinforcement learning is messy and expensive. Trial and error learning, via reinforcement learning, is computationally expensive and harder to scale. It requires defining rewards, managing exploration, building environments, all of which are more complex than just training on a big text dump. I thought that was a really great, quick summarization. Also, totally fun. I love the same thing with the conundrum episodes when it's AI talking about AI. And it's like, listen, AI's got to get its together. And you're like, you are AI. So it gets very meta. It's like, we got to get this stuff figured out. It's like, yes, you do. In agreement.
I had the same experience. It was like, well, AI does this,
Yeah.
but for us, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's us?
Yeah.
Are you?
You and me, Beth. Yeah. You and me, Beth. We're going to fix this. All right, we're about out of time, but what do you guys? Any last thoughts on this? First of all, I want to say thank you, Andy, for bringing this to our attention because it's not something I had seen, and that's sort of my favorite part about the show is that topics for shows get brought up that maybe aren't in our individual view, but end up becoming some of my favorite conversations. So props, Andy, for bringing this up. Highly recommend anybody going and reading the paper or doing what we just discussed and having a conversation maybe with an LLM about it, however you see fit. I think, Beth, you shared it in the comments as far as the link to it, but the official name of the paper is, for anybody that's just listening to us, is the era of experience paper, or the era of experience. I'm sure if you looked it up from DeepMind, you will absolutely find the right link to that paper, whether it's a blog or, on archive or something like that. So any last thoughts on this, guys? Go ahead, Beth.
It's a really weird URL if you're looking it up.
Okay.
So it's like storage APIs as part of the name, and then it's got a bunch of spaces in the actual name. So if you see something that looks like, wow, I'm not sure, it's probably right.
Okay. Perfect.
I,
Go for
I
it.
would just say real quickly, since we're talking about AI moving into a next stage of development or experience, uh, just remember crap in, crap out. So just that, I think that's a good guiding principle for anything that you develop, make, create. Just take that viewpoint, and you'll learn a lot of things that you need to do before you move to a next step down the line.
My last comment will be about what I envision for the future is not some centralized memory and or intelligence, but it's going to be, you know, millions and millions of very, very smart agents out there, and each of them with their own individual memories. And eventually there'll be some kind of protocol that's developed like MCP is for agent to agent communication that will allow specialist systems that are focused on it and generating and learning around a certain domain, being able to be consulted by a more generalist AI that may be called upon, the foundation models, that they would then be able to immediately bring in the context of the specialist agent that's out there continuously learning and developing a high degree of expertise. And I think that is perfectly analogous to the way human knowledge exists, right? There are human individual experts who dedicate their lives to pursuit of a certain thing. There will be special agents that are dedicated by their programming to pursue a certain special set of knowledge and intelligence. And then how do we gang those things together when needed in order to get the best? And there'll be toll booths, I'm sure, on that highway, and there'll also be blocks, right? You can't go here because you're not from the right geopolitical space. And all of those problems are the ones that are confronting us now as AI becomes more and more prevalent as a foundation for the co-intelligence between humans and AI.
So you just said the highway. You made me think of the World Wide Web. So perhaps the future is some sort of MCP or WWA, Worldwide Agent, and it connects all the highly specialized agents together in the same way that the internet connected all sorts of highly specialized pieces of
Yep.
content around the world, so that they can proactively work together, like you said, agent to agent. But just think of that on a complete global scale, and there being quite literally billions or trillions of these agents available, and how that might connect together. It's all part of it. Hey, tomorrow we're going to kind of sort of be continuing this conversation in one way, and that's that we're going to keep talking about reasoning AI era, and we're going to specifically be talking about chain of thought, speculative chain of thought, collaborative chain of thought, and chain of RAG. So that's coming up on tomorrow's show. That's also going to be a really great conversation. I'm really looking forward to that one. Lots going on in chain of thought. We bring it up a lot in this show. So I'm glad that we're going to have an opportunity to kind of dive a little bit deeper into it. So Justin says WWA. Yeah, go ahead. Go get the domain names now. I coined it. You had yet another $1 million idea coming from the Daily AI Show. Hey, don't forget, as we come up to the weekend, a couple quick things. Number one, we're here. If this is your first time ever listening to us, welcome. We're here Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live, Eastern, that is. If you can't join us live, no big deal. You can always obviously catch us on the different networks, from YouTube to Spotify to AI podcasts and so on and so forth. We're video on YouTube as well as Spotify, and the other ones we're just listening podcast platforms. So thank you to everybody who's listening to us. If you like what we're doing, like and subscribe. That would be amazing. If you want to join the live chat, we recommend coming over to YouTube to do that. On Saturdays, I mentioned it before, I do a fun episode that's all about conundrums, and it is to AI folks having a conversation about AI. It's super fun. It's not us live. It's just something extra we do. Speaking of extra, two other things we do that you can join us with is the newsletter. That's free. Goes out every Sunday morning. go to dailyishow.com. You can sign up for that whenever you like. Just do it before Sunday morning so you can get the next episode coming out. And then also we have a community where anybody can carry on this conversation, even if you can't reach us live. So you can go to that by going to the Daily AI Show community.com. That will take you to the Slack login and get you all set up. Okay, so there's all the different ways you can interact with this show. We would love to see you in any one of those places along the way. But more importantly, come back tomorrow and learn all about chain of thought and the different ways that it's being used today. So that's it, guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Aloha.